Let's rewind like a VHS. Turn back the time, feel the beat in our chest. Make sure that we never forget. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. Let's concede that we wanna believe that the past was only a dream, just a place that we never could leave. Follow us on the way to retrieve. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. Like a VHS, turn back the time, feel the beat in our chest. Make sure that we never forget. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. Let's concede that we wanna believe that the past was only a dream, just a place that we never could leave. Follow us on the way to retrieve. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS. VHS, VHS. Let's rewind like a VHS.
What up, everyone? DJ Anubis here with you on the Metal Radio podcast with my co-host and great friend Kevin Lambert from The Entertainment Headquarters, and we are the Cinematic Synergy. A monthly episodic thing that we do where we alternate picks and we decide what movie we're going to watch and review. Sometimes it'll be something we haven't seen at all. Sometimes it'll be stuff we have seen. This time it was my pick, and you hadn't seen this previously, if I'm correct, as he's sipping on his tea.
Sipping on my tea in my Metal Tavern Radio podcast cup. Also got my badge on. And if I do fancy a beer later on, I know what to open it with.
Look at that.
And he didn't even have to pay me to promote him. I just wanted to do it because that's how close we are. But going back to favorites. Yes, going back to what you're saying, I thought Orca was. I know it is your pick, but I think I had mentioned it quite a while ago. I hadn't seen it.
Oh, actually, it was your pick. Excuse me, it was.
I think it was.
I just been telling you to watch it.
I don't know. I think the last Cinematic Synergy we did. I don't know how it came about in conversation, but it kind of came about Orca. And obviously, I don't know if we had been talking about Jaws to somebody, and next thing I know, Orca was mentioned, and I said, I've heard of the movie, I just haven't had the opportunity to see it, and I did say, soon as it's my next pick on Cinematic, that I think...
Yeah, I think what happened was we somehow were talking about it, and you said, you know what, I think I want to do that for the next Cinematic Synergy, so that's a good idea.
Yeah, perfect opportunity for me, to finally deep dive into this film, which I've heard people talk about. It's always been an interesting concept to me. Also, I think another reason why this was brought up is I think I mentioned to you that at some point this year, there's an Australian film coming out called Alpha, which is based on a diver trapped in the middle of an ocean where there's a killer whale and a great white battling side to side with him trapped in the middle of it all. So I think this was the perfect opportunity to check this movie out.
Yeah, so before we dive in, I'm gonna go ahead because some people, this is not a movie too many people talk about. They either don't remember much or they just haven't seen it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and play the trailer for it, and then we'll get into the review because there's a lot of interesting things to unpack about this film. It is much different than most of the creature feature films that we saw during the 70s. So let's give it a whirl and check out Orca.
The ancient Romans called him Orca or Canis, Latin for bringer of death. He is without challenge the most powerful animal on the globe, the killer whale. Orca has 48 teeth, set in 2 impressive rows. In some respects, the orca's intelligence may be even superior to man's. They remain loyal to one mate for life. As parents, they are exemplary, better than many human beings, and like human beings, they have a profound instinct for vengeance. An innocent creature is destroyed by an act of human cruelty, and the ultimate battle of man against nature begins. Dino De Laurentiis presents Orca.
Can you commit a sin against an animal?
He followed you. He saw you on the deck of the boat.
They always remember the human being who had tried to harm them.
He deliberately left you your boat because he wants to fight you on the sea.
I won't do that.
Now the fish have vanished from the fishing grounds. And it's all because of your whale.
In fact, I won't fight him at all.
You're not even man enough to accept the excitement of his challenge.
I'll fight you! You're a vengeful son of a...
Orca, starring Richard Harris, Charlotte Rampling, Will Sampson, Keenan Wynn. A spectacular adventure. From the depths of the sea to the top of the world.
It's going to be a fair fight on equal terms.
A fight to the death.
Nolan!
Between the 2 most dangerous animals on Earth.
What in hell are you?
Man and Orca.
And there you have it, Orca. So yeah, my backstory with the film obviously is I was a product. This came out in '77, so I had to be about 7 years old. And so at the time, my babysitter at the time, super hot chick, especially when I was young, I could tell. But she used to take me to the movies a lot to drive in, and so even my mom did at the time as well. But she was the one that kind of like took me to a lot of the ones that were hip at the time. So she was in her 20s, so I'd be going and seeing like Jaws. Like I forced her to take me to Jaws, and she's like, I don't know, I think you're gonna have nightmares. I said, nah. I felt like a 5-year-old. I'm a big kid. He's like, guess what? I had nightmares. But you know, I went to all these other creature features, Tentacles, Orca, Jaws 2, etc. So it was really a lot of fun as a kid to go do this at that time. And but as I was telling you, and obviously you just watched it, it's like this film is like entirely different in presentation of how it compares to some of the other films. And the funny thing is, from what I read, Dino De Laurentiis, he wanted to compete with Jaws. Jaws had been this massive success, and he wanted to make a film. He says, I need a creature that's bigger and badder than Jaws and the shark. And so we get that in the early part of the film. So basically the setup is Richard Harris is this guy named Captain Nolan who goes about and he basically hunts for sharks, great whites. You know, it's like trophies and like for aquariums. He's trying to capture one for an aquarium, which has never been done even to this day, to keep a great white in captivity alive. Like it's very difficult. And I think that I loved about the film too, also is the beginning, it just starts with the noise of the whales being recorded, you know, the sounds and the talking. And we have Charlotte Rampling, who I think she's sort of just like this biologist, or you know, she just kind of like studies fish and science and stuff like that. So she's diving. And I'm not sure what she's searching for. I can't remember if she's just checking coral reefs or whatever, but we get the quick like interaction. She's being confronted by a great white that's been in the area. And so she's hiding down in the rocks, similar to what we saw with Hooper and Jaws after he breaks out of the cage. So then we get thrown up to the surface, and Harris is there on his ship. He's got his crew, and they're clearly looking for the shark. They've been chumming probably the waters, which is very bad if you're divers. You don't want to be out there when they're chumming or whatever to try to draw folks in. Which is also interesting because I forgot that Robert Carradine was in this, and he's the guy that's the helper of Charlotte Rampling's character. So he's on this little like boat. It's like a little rafty type boat, and he's trying to like get to Charlotte because he knows there's a shark out there, and of course Harris now knows, and they're going to try to get it. So let me just ask you, like early on in this film, how do you feel about the setup and what's going on?
I think I like how it starts the movie off and it basically tells you what's going on right from the beginning. You've got this like aqua or like you see oceanologist, whatever you would like to call her. You see her in the beginning. You then see like this pool of whales, you know, and then you hear the, you know, the whale noises, which you initially are thinking are coming from this, you know, pod of whales, but it's not. It's coming from this recording. And then it kind of skips as well a bit further on where you see her teaching, I guess, college students.
Mm-hmm.
And she's explaining like the patterns of whales, how they're very intelligent, how, you know, they're very similar to humans, how they think, how they operate. They're, you know, very territorial, they're very, you know, protective parents. They even show you like a scan of a baby whale inside the womb of a mother, how it's got like 5 little fingers and things like. So they set up the beginning of the film very well by basically putting it right out there about like the whale and how they operate and all of that. And then obviously you see, you know, the main characters in the movie who are in this fishing boat, who very much are like very, I guess, egotistical and very greedy, and they're basically only out there, like you see it, to capture a great white or anything that brings them profit. It's quite well set up, and obviously it also kind of set up straight away to give you emphasis and empathy for the whale itself.
Yeah, so like the early scene, of course, once Rampling is coming out from the coral and making her way back to, so she gets on the little boat. Of course, Harris is pissed off because Ken has been pushing his little boat in between the boat because he's trying to get his diver up before the shark gets there and before Nolan makes the situation worse. And Nolan's getting ready to yell at the diver until he realizes, oh, it's a beautiful hot chick. You know, I won't be yelling at her too much.
Mm-hmm.
So she ends up jumping on the boat with him. And I don't know why Ken was staying behind. Maybe he's going to try to tie the little boat to the big ship. I don't remember. But anyway, he ends up falling overboard. And now we have the little boat on its own, and he's out in the middle of the water. Now the shark's still out there. And all of a sudden, we've got the shark pursuing him. And then all of a sudden, you know, no one really sees because it's all happening under the surface. We have the killer whale that's zooming through, and it ends up hitting the great white so hard that it flies out of the water. And then we see like this nice little scene where the shark's bleeding to death out of pain, even has like a little cry. And you get this moment where Harris is like, what on earth did that? And then, of course, Rampling's like, there's only one creature on the earth that can do that. That's the killer whale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this, you know, this starts this dialogue between her name's Rachel Bedford, Rampling's character, and Nolan. And so she's explaining like, yeah, you know, whales are very intelligent, strong. And then, of course, she goes to that classroom scene you're talking about where Nolan's actually been kind of hanging in the back watching her discussions about the whale. And now he's decided, oh, you know what? I think I need to catch one so I can go send it to an aquarium and I'll get lots of money.
Mm-hmm. He just says
but
pounds. He just says dollar signs, doesn't he?
yeah, he's very arrogant, and he's not like the funny thing about Harris's character is that it's not one that's totally hateful. You don't like he's very hot and cold, and so it's not like he is arrogant, but he's sort of naive, I think. So because throughout the film, he's trying to learn more about why the whale is doing what it's doing. Like he's shocked that some of the things that happen that we'll get into about why the whale's behaving the way it is, and he doesn't believe it at first. He's like, it's just impossible. They're just animals. But she tries to explain to him it's much more than that with whales because they're very, very intelligent and sometimes even smarter than men.
Yeah.
So he's taking it upon himself. He's like, I'm gonna go catch one. She's like, you got to be careful because they remember. They have strong memories like elephants. Like if you fuck up, you're gonna have a problem on your hands.
Yeah.
So he's decided he's gonna go after the male, and you can tell the difference a little bit by their dorsal fins. The males generally have the much taller, steeple one. One thing to keep in mind is we'll talk about this as well a bit. It's like killer whales in captivity, their fins tend to curve over, and I think it has a lot to do with the environment, the lack of open water. They can't really get to speeds. I don't know if that has a part to do with their fins staying straight or not, but it definitely affects killer whales in captivity. So that's something to keep in mind here. So the killer whales, the males, you can definitely tell who they are. They're like the big alpha boys with the big fins. And so Harris has got his little gun which I've never understood. Like from looking at the gun, it looks almost like just a harpoon. It doesn't even look like something that has a syringe or anything. He catches them basically by a rope, and it's really traumatic. Like I don't care if it's a shark or what. It's not a very healthy way of catching animals at all.
Well, this is why whaling's banned in so many countries, because it's literally killing these animals in absolute agonizing pain.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at how even now they tag great whites, it's like it's a whole process. They got to bring them up on this little makeshift raft thing, and they just basically tranquilize them. It's not like they really knock them out cold or anything, but they find ways to bring them in without damaging the shark in any way. Now, I don't know if the whales that they used to catch for SeaWorld and all that were done this way. I mean, I have to recommend Blackfish to anyone ever seen that doc. It's going to change your viewpoint of whales in captivity. But they weren't really treated very well back then. And so I don't know if that's really accurate in terms of how they were caught, but I hope not, because it's just egregious. Anyway, he goes to try to shoot the male, and it actually nicks the dorsal, but then hits the female, which is its mate. And you just hear just screaming, and it's very traumatic. And of course, now like Harris is trying to get this whale back on the boat again. Not the best way to do it. They're just basically hanging it, and you can see the blood. And of course, this is a little bit after she's gone, and she's circling her way back to the back of the boat and trying to kill herself with using the propeller from the ship to just end her life. Like it's
the whole thing I found very traumatic. This whole sequence, because the female's been hurt, and I think she knows she's been fatally injured and she's gonna die regardless. So then she tries to end her own life, and there's a reason why she's trying to end her own life. And I just found it so barbaric. The fact is, he wants to capture this whale and take it away to some aquarium, but there's no like tank on the boat. There's nothing to store this animal in. He literally wants to hold it up in the air. Well, as you know, that just wouldn't work. So when he finally does get the female on board, you get this horrendous screaming from her, and eventually, as she's hanging in the air, her stomach opens up and a fetus falls to the floor. She obviously was carrying, she was pregnant, which is another reason why the male was so overprotective, and probably why the male also attacked the shark earlier on. It was in its territory. He was defending his pod of whales. He was defending its female. And when Harris sees the fetus he instantly has immediate regret.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's so traumatic for him. Right? He's like, he gets the hose and or I think maybe the other guy sprayed it off, but it's so traumatic for him that he's like, oh my God, what have I done? But like, it is really tough. In fact, it's so funny. I showed Neko this film for the first time a couple of years ago. And as I'm watching it down here, she's just on the main floor reading, and she heard that scene. She's like, oh my God, can you please turn that off? Like, it still affects her, even that just one scene. And I've read people about this film, and the lasting impression people think about with this film is that scene. It's always that scene. Like, of all the things that happen in the film, that one is the most traumatic for people to
it's when the male, obviously, you must say his child, his fetus in the water, and his mate hung up, and he lifts his head up out and he gives off this horrendous, growl and anger and sadness at seeing what's took place.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's to the credit of the filmmaker. It's very effective because even when she's hanging and the fetus is gone and everything, you still hear the whimpering a little bit from the whale. Like, it's very
she's basically slowly dying. Because even she notices Ramsey's character that basically, she's heavily bleeding out. The fact that she's had a miscarriage and she's bleeding out as well.
Yep. So eventually, Nolan cuts the carcass loose because at this point the male is like really trying to attack the boat. Like, he's already taken one person down who's actually trying to cut it down, the corpse. And so, the male hits up and gets him and takes him down. And so the male's pissed. He's hitting the boat. He's really going crazy. So they cut the female down, and she's in the water. And now the ship heads back to shore, and so at this point we get a viewpoint of the male pushing his female mate long distance to beach it. And so it's even kind of interesting because the pod is with him for a while, but then they kind of break off, and he kind of does his own thing. I guess at this point they realize he's got his own job to do, and they're going to go carry on as a group. And some people, even in the movie, they when they first see the female on the shore, Nolan comes by with one of his mates. I forget the name of the guy that was with him, but basically he didn't think it was the female they had, even though it looks quite clear that it is. He didn't think that the orca would bring it all the way over, and he thought for first that she swam there and did that. But believe it or not, this shit happens, and I'll just show a quick clip of this because this happens with killer whales, believe it or not.
Killer whale is carrying the corpse of her dead newborn.
J31, in fact, had lost the calf, and she was pushing it around on her head.
So it is something that killer whales will do. Now, the only thing I would say is that I'm not really sure because I didn't really look up a lot of it, but whether or not a killer whale will be this vengeful to do the kind of things that it does in the film, I don't know, but it makes for a good story. It works for the film.
Obviously exaggerated, but you can understand the anguish and any parent, whether it's animal or like another animal that's very heavily protective is an elephant, for example. You've seen in the wild and wildlife documentaries elephants. If a baby elephant's in danger, it's not just the one parent that goes after whatever's attacking the baby elephant. The whole family of elephants go charging in. So it just shows you, human or animal, what it's like this instinct, an animalistic instinct, whether you're human or animal, to go and protect the offspring or to protect the mate. It's like that's something, I guess, that is very true what they try to explain in this film, that there is this kindred connection between we.
Yeah, and orcas are very social animals. They raise their young, as pods, and they teach them, and so they're very very loyal to one another in their pods. In fact, I don't want to go off too much, but there is this other film called The Whale, which is narrated by Ryan Reynolds, that talks about this young whale, Luna, that got detached from its pod and basically lost. But what it did was it grew close to this community in this lagoon, basically. And so it was there hanging around all the time. People started really liking it, but it became a problem because fishing, of course, having a whale there chases fish away. Plus, she was so friendly that she would end up getting in the way of boats, and so it became like a hazard. Eventually, and that's what sort of got her killed in the end because she got too close to a boat, and it killed her. But again, they're just such social animals that you can actually bond with them, even if you're just human versus whale. Like they're just very friendly. That's why when I look at blackfish and the way that we've treated them over the years, it's just entertainment. It's kind of depressing.
It's like I went to Lanzarote, which is an island, near where I live. It's in there. It's one of the there's 4 islands altogether. And when I went there, they had not long opened a place called Rancho, Texas, which was like this water-themed park, but they had different animals in location. They had a tiger, a white tiger, which I felt very sorry for because it was the only one in this giant area. And you had people taking pictures, but even though it was there, I felt sorry for it because it was on its own. It was just circling its habitat and going through the water.
Where is this called?
It's in Lanzarote. It's an island. You've got Lanzarote, Tenerife, Fuerteventura, and Gran Canaria. It's like a group of islands. So we went to there, and then one of the shows they had on was a dolphin show. They had like a giant habitat, and there's about 4 dolphins. And at first, I was very much impressed with it all. It looked clean, it looked healthy. And I even paid and got my photo tape with one of the dolphins because, I just assumed that they were being well looked after. And then it wasn't until I went to one of the bars and I was speaking to one of the waiters who was English. And he actually said, I wouldn't have paid because, all this. He goes, I'm going to explain why. He says about 4 hours prior to them doing a show, they don't feed the dolphins. They basically starve them a little bit or make them hungry. And why they make them hungry is so they can perform.
Right.
Because
the
if
reward of the fish.
So if you ever watch a show, or like even with, say, sea lions, you'll see them perform and do all these tricks, and what's the first thing they do once they perform? They get a reward. And it's when I was told these stories, it kind of made us think more,
Yeah, and I understand your point too, because I've been to SeaWorld before, and I've seen like the little tanks with the sharks and everything. And so, obviously, sharks and fish are a little bit different because they're not really performing; they're just doing their everyday thing. But you have a chance to pet a dolphin or meet one, take a picture with it, or even a whale. Like it's really nice because you're never going to really experience that unless you're out in the ocean. But at the same time, after you get older, you're kind of thinking, man, if you just knew the shit that they go through as creatures. And so it's like, I think we are at a point now in our history that we cannot do that anymore. We could probably just let them be out on the wild and just showcase and maybe tell us stories about them. While I'd rather watch a film about them in the wild than actually go to SeaWorld and watch them perform. It just doesn't make any sense.
To see them in their natural habitat.
Yeah. So anyway, Nolan, he sees this female on the beach. It's dead, obviously, and he's kind of looking at the woman. Rampling is down there, and she's kind of just reading. I don't know if it's like some sort of poem or something, but she's also eventually a guy comes down by the name of let me see what his name was, Jacob Ullman, played by Will Sampson, and people recognize him from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He's a very good actor, Native American actor, and so he's obviously
he was also in a film we did a franchise discussion on, Poltergeist.
Yes,
he was in the second Poltergeist.
Yep. So he's basically just native to the island that they're a part of, And obviously, Nolan is not actually a native to the island. He's just kind of visiting and getting refueled and repairs done to his truck or his ship that the whale caused after the female thing. So Jacob, he's basically telling him like, yeah, she's right. Whales do have a good memory. They are vengeful, and so right now, this whale is telling you that you've got a problem on your hands, that you need to go handle it. And the reason for this is they all understand that if Nolan doesn't go out and deal with this with the whale one way or the other, the whale is going to create havoc on the town and the little lagoon there, because it's going to chase fish away. Even the fishermen that are there are telling Nolan, like, you have to figure out what to do with this, like either kill it or find a way to get it away from here, because it's going to fuck up our whole industry.
Mm-hmm.
And soon enough, the whale starts putting a couple of holes in a couple of the boats that are in the harbor, sinking them right away, not touching his. It's like, I'm going to let you have your boat because I want you out here. And at first, Nolan's like, I'm not doing that. He doesn't want to go out there and get sunk or have to deal with this whale, but he's also not believing that the whale is smart enough to stick around. But as you see, for the next few scenes, the whale continues to wreak havoc. In fact, it breaks like a gas line that goes up to the petroleum and just sets it on fire. And I think one of the funnier things about it all is how the whale, how it interacts with Nolan afterwards. So after like that petroleum thing blows up, it's jumping in the air, celebrating, and basically wagging its tail at Nolan, like, yeah,
which
come on.
I love those scenes. I just thought the scene. Obviously, clearly they've probably just put the imagery of the whale jumping about with the photography in the background. But I just think it's such an impressive scene. Seeing the whale like celebrating, its victory or causing havoc, which I thought was really, really great. Another thing I noticed,
taunting him the whole time.
Yeah. Another thing I like as well about Captain Nolan is that after the initial, death of the female, and he has immediate regret throughout the next few, your next part of the movie, when he's like, I'm not going to hunt a whale anymore. I'm not leaving. He like acts like he's not bothered by it. He like puts a front on. He puts on like, but deep down, it's probably killing him inside. And there's that scene where he actually goes to church and says, can you commit a sin against an animal? Mm-hmm. And in the reverend, the priest goes, you can commit a sin against grass if you want to. It's all in your perspective of what you hold basically deep inside, your morals and all of that stuff. So he's like he's torn inside, and that's what's happening with him. But on the outside, he's got this wall up, and he's still acting like he's not bothered about the whale at the events that happened. It hasn't really affected him.
Yeah, he's just basically become stubborn. He's like, It's like out of sight, out of mind, But it's funny because the more damage that the whale causes to the town, you see that moment where all the fishermen are getting together. They literally banded together to fix his ship. They're like, we got to get this guy out of this. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, like you said, Nolan, even with all that, he's like, I'm not going anywhere. Why am I? The fish is gone, even though he knows it's not. The mammal, of course, but it gets to a point where this is probably one of the most scenes that I don't think would really, really happen. But again, this is for the shock value, and this is basically what sends Nolan over the edge. Is we have a young woman. I can't remember if it's his daughter or just his friend, Annie. Bo Derek, by the way, her first role. Very beautiful. So she's basically like a shipmate, and the thing about the whale is it does take its anger out on anybody who was on the boat. However, I don't believe that Annie or anyone else really deserved kind of the shit that happened to him. But this is, again, we need some sort of catalyst to get Nolan to say, fuck it, I got to go deal with this. Like this, and this is the moment where they kind of live on their makeshift house that's on stilts. So it's halfway in the water and halfway on the land. And during
it's like near the harbor, built just off the harbor, but on the side of a cliff face.
Yeah.
facing like obviously the ocean side.
Yeah. And prior, when the killer whale was attacking the boat after the female kill was, she broke her leg. Annie did, and so she's in a cast, and she's been kind of walking around the house, and she actually wants to go with Nolan out to wherever it is because she's kind of fearful too. They realize this whale means business now. Again, we're just talking about the intelligence of the whale because what it starts doing is as Nolan goes to the garage to kind of prepare, I forget what he was going to do. He might have planned on killing it. I don't know. But no, he's planning on leaving. They were trying to get in the truck and going because the other guy went to get gas and the guy wouldn't give him any gas. Like, nope, you're not leaving this place. Not by air. You can leave on your boat, but you're not leaving by truck.
Yeah.
So the whale starts hitting the stilts of the house and knocking them down. And the house, of course, is now starting to fall, and Annie's in there. Both Nolan and the other guy are trying to get to Annie to get to her before it slips into the water. But as she's towards the bottom of the house, the whale comes up, bites her cast leg, and takes her leg and takes off. So I don't really think that would necessarily happen in the vengeful thing is the whale is very smart, and I don't really think it would have saw her as a threat of any kind. But again, in order to keep the story moving, I think this is what they had to do to get Nolan to say, "Fuck it, I gotta go deal with this" because he's mad.
Yes. Yeah, I think after being in denial and basically being stubborn and denying the events that are happening and all, I think once he sees what's happened with Annie, he's just full of rage.
Yeah.
He even calls the whale a son of a bitch.
Yeah.
It's like, how come you son of a bitch?
Yeah.
Which I loved. I love these scenes. And it really sets up. And you know what? This is the first time in a long time in a movie that they actually championing the animal.
Yes.
Because
in fact, I think Dino De Laurentiis, he was kind of like, when he was being interviewed at one point, he's like, people are going to find more empathy for the whale than they will for Harris. And that's true. That's how this movie plays out. It's like, even from the soundtrack score, like it's very touching. It's not like,
I like the score of this movie. It's very soothing, but it hits in the heart. But especially right at the end, the female that sings.
Yes.
One thing I've noticed, like this came out in 1977. I think, is it 1977? Yes.
Yeah.
And Jaws came out in 1975. So clearly, just like if we look at like the kaiju genre, for example, after like you had the Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, and you got Godzilla, you got them. It started this kind of wave of feature films very similar. This went down the same route where you had this, and you can even see the likes of, say, Alligator that came out a few years after this. The difference is with Jaws, that was so impactful and made a bang, just like what Godzilla 1954 did. And the difference is with that is when that film was made by Steven Spielberg, the shark was intentionally made vicious, like an antagonist. You are rooting for the sailors, you are rooting for them to get the hands and defeat the shark. It's in what you've just mentioned, the director wanted to flip it on its head and do a different take, where this is basically a similar story in some ways, but instead of rooting for the sailors, you're rooting for the whale to be victorious.
Yeah, and it was so funny too because I mentioned how Laurentiis wanted a creature that was more powerful than a shark, and so they decided on a killer whale. But the funnier thing about this was the film, it didn't do quite as well as they had hoped. I think Laurentiis thought this might be something that was going to skyrocket or something, but I think their budget was like between $6 and $17 million, but they only made like $14 million in the box office.
Yeah.
But it still had an impact because what ends up happening is, and I don't know if you know this, but obviously the whale kills that great white at the beginning of the film. That's sort of what Laurentiis wanted. He wanted like, hey, I got something bigger and badder than that great white. But when Jaws 2 came out, they had a scene where a dead orca was on the beach.
Yes.
And so that was their way of saying, oh, no, the shark's still king. We can take care of that Orca for you. So I always thought that little banter between, just subtly between directors was kind of funny, how that played out.
Yeah, but that's what I took away from this, is that this is like the anti-Jaws. This is basically what it was made. And obviously they tried to humanize the Orca in this, basically, by the whole miscarriage storyline, which is connecting to many
It actually
women.
carries out too, because I don't know if did you ever see Tentacles? The octopus movie?
I don't think I have, no.
That's another one maybe down the road to check out, because they use orcas in that as heroes. So it's really cool how it just kind of plays. Uh-oh. He always has a problem with that mic. It just keeps jumping out at him.
I've even got a longer, I actually finally got a longer fucking cable for the thing. Because my cable guys broke a few weeks back, where I can actually stretch my microphone out, and I had this tiny itty bitty cable, and it still fucking falls over.
All right, so now we have Annie, who's passed away tragically after her leg being taken by the Orca, and so we have Nolan, Bedford, Jacob. He's decided he's going to travel along with them, and the guy that what the fuck is that dude's name?
Gus, you've got Novik, you've got Ken, you've got Paul, you've got Swain.
Oh, his name is Paul. Okay, I think Paul is his name. The one, I think, because he was in a relationship with Annie. So
yeah.
So Paul's like the fourth. So it's the four of them, and they're getting on the boat. And of course, we had this nice little scene by Harris as they leave in the harbor. And of course, all the town is on the sides watching them go. They're like, "Sayonara, dude! Get out of here. We are done with you. We do not want you here anymore." So it is kind of like one of those scenes where you kind of feel bad for Nolan, because everybody just hates him now, but it's like he kind of brought it on himself by not dealing with the issue earlier. So they start heading out, and the plan is Nolan's decided that, okay, I'm going to let this fish take us wherever it wants this battle to take place. So they're just following it and following it and following it, even to the point that now they're starting to run out of gas. Like the whale's taking them up north to the Arctic, and it's really at the whale's advantage now. How did you feel about how this part was playing out?
Well, obviously, after the death of Annie, he is now enraged. After being stubborn, after being in denial, the events that he started have actually affected the village and now have affected people's lives around him. He's now enraged and come to the conclusion it's either him or the whale. So then now he and these guys are now set out.
And did you get the same sense that I did, that even at this point, because there are stuff that we see Nolan say a little bit afterwards as they travel, Nolan's kind of written himself off as he doesn't think he's coming back anyway. I think he thinks he's going to lose.
I think he's got that in his head, and I think he feels like, because he clearly is a religious person, because why would you go to church and speak to a priest and say, have I committed a sin against this animal? I think he feels as if everything has happened because it's his fault at the end of the day. And he feels now that he's being punished for a sin that he's committed. That's another vibe I got, because even though this is like an animal versus man storyline, it does have kind of this link to religion and a person who's feeling tremendous guilt, who now, he now wants to kind of, I guess, revenge, he wants to kind of, repent his sins and maybe finally give in and, be saved. Also, like you've mentioned with the, when you had the character of, what's his called? Really, I've got it, yeah. When you've got the character of Jacob, he even mentions like folklores and superstitions and all of this, and seeing with the whale being attacked, it's caused like a curse on the village, and this is why the fish are stopping coming in, and the fishermen are losing, business and all that. So all has like this underlining kind of mythical element, even though it's not said out loud.
Yeah.
And then obviously Captain Nolan is now, or you could call him Captain Abraham. Him who goes
Ahab,
after Captain Ahab. Yeah, you could call him that this time, who went after the whale. It's kind of connection to that as well.
Yeah.
So there's so many different things that they use throughout this movie that you can think out loud and think that makes sense, or this looks good, or this reminds me of this, and that's what I took away from this. In these particular scenes where he's going after the whale, it's not on the level of when they finally went after the shark in Jaws, but you did get this sense that he knew when he was going out after the shark, he probably isn't coming back. But I also think in his mind, he didn't want to come back because he had kind of caused so much harm to people he cared about all around him.
Yeah, he kind of understood. And of course, again, Annie's death, now it affects him too, because he knows his action had a reaction that caused, as you said, trouble with the town. If he had not done what he'd done, Annie would be still alive. It's just one of those things where he knows his choice has led to a lot of destruction.
Mate, I did laugh. I can't help but I did laugh. The fact that she's broke her fucking leg in the wheel targets the leg she's broken, and then yet she's hanging on the side. And the wheel just comes and jumps on her leg. And it's like, out of all the legs, out of all the places, out of all the things that could happen, it's her and it's that leg.
Yeah. And of course, that's, people made comparisons with Jaws and the guy that lost his leg in that film and how it's playing out. But so as they're heading out, they lose Ken, who gets taken by the whale. And then there's a point where Paul, he's trying to get the lifeboat back over to to put on the side, because he's like, they're running out of fuel, they have nowhere to go. Now Harris, Nolan's thought about it. He's like, even if he's on a death wish, he knows that they can just radio for SOS, get a copter to come out and come get them. So he knows that there's an escape plan for them. But Paul, again, the whale comes up, puts a hole in it, and Paul is taken and drowned. Or I don't think the whale ever consumes them, but he does definitely fuck them over and probably drag them down or whatever. So anyway, there comes a point where it starts to be daylight, and Jacob, he makes the calls to SOS because they can kind of see where Bedford, she sees that there's like this iceberg that's slowly coming at them. This is the killer whale is pushing it towards them. So it's clearly going to try to hit the ship to get it to come down.
So you clearly now understand what happened to the Titanic. It was Orca wheels. The Orcas sank the Titanic.
Yeah, they just pushed that big ass shit over there. So look at all the possible fish that we can get out of this.
It's dinner time, boys and girls.
So so anyway, after Jacob puts out the SOS, there's like this avalanche of ice that comes down on the ship, and he doesn't make it. Nolan and Bedford get off into one of their little ice platforms there, and so the ship is going down, it's sinking. But the SOS is out there, so they do know that. So now it's just Nolan and the girl, and they're now on this ice plat. And this is the interesting also that I wanted to bring up is this is what I do like about the film is it does stay true to some of the whale's behavior about how it hunts. And so if you've never seen how these whales behave with sea lions, it's really something to behold. Like it's fucking incredible how they get their food. Like you would never think they could do this kind of shit, but they're so smart. I couldn't find any footage of the whale actually sitting on top of the iceberg, but I have seen it before. But most of the time, as you can see, they go together and they create this wave of water that like pushes these sea lions off of their icebergs.
Well, as you've just seen in that clip, it's quite a large bit of ice mass. You've got Yeah,
further.
you've got
So, like,
4 orcas that went underneath it, were battering it with its tail to smash it into bits, like smashing glass.
yeah,
And now they're forcing this poor sea lion off of the ice to, it's feeding time basically.
yeah, it's crazy just how smart they are. Like,
I even seen though, like that. This is how dangerous a killer whale is. They even attack in groups other whales.
yeah, yeah.
So I think they've hunted humpback whales, they've hunted sperm whales.
Yeah,
They're
have you
all
ever seen them? Sometimes when these seals are on the beach, like they'll beach themselves temporarily to try to grab them.
yeah,
It's really, and then they'll bounce back out.
yeah,
And
definitely. There's even I've even seen footage of whales chasing after penguins, but penguins are one of the hardest things for a whale to catch.
yeah,
Like look at that. That's just crazy. What that you see in there. But yeah, whales are definitely the alpha of the alpha predator on the earth
and they
outside of
play for
us.
food too. In fact, that's kind of like this final scene that we get where eventually Nolan, like there's another bigger iceberg to the side. They're on this like small ice thing like those seals were. So he gets her over to the bigger one, but the whale's able to like somehow detach the smaller platform to now Nolan's stuck on this little thing like that seal is. And he initially thinks, and we didn't really talk about this, but he initially thinks that, oh, okay, we're going to the Arctic where the whale needs to breathe. So he thinks he's got an advantage because the whale's got to come up for air.
Mm-hmm.
So he thinks that's going to work to his advantage. But this is, you see in the film, Nolan tries to read and learn a little bit about the whale, but he doesn't quite understand it. Like if he did, he would know that this whale knows how to hunt in the Arctic.
Mm-hmm.
So he clearly doesn't know that much about it. But the whale separates him from the girl. She's on a bigger piece of ice that the whale can't really get to. And now it's just him and the whale. And so the whale comes up a couple times. He tries shooting it with the rifle, but either misses or just the whale's too quick and gets away from him. Then, of course, we see the scene. This is definitely a fake whale that they put up there, but it's, just trying to give us this look of this menacing creature that's supposedly there. But luckily, they used a lot more real footage from the couple of whales they used at the train site. In fact, you can see it in the film. Some of the footage is from like a SeaWorld or a marine land where it's taken. But the whale comes up, sits on the ice, and he's hanging on the other side of it. It's tilted, so he slips down in the water. And now it's just him and the whale. This is where a whale will, at times with a sea lion, they will pop them up in the air for fun and like beat them to death, basically first to slow them down or knock them unconscious or whatever they're doing. But basically playing with their food. And so we get this. I'll let you finish it. Go ahead and explain what happens.
So basically at the end of the movie, after there's been like this cat and mouse game between him and this orca. Like you've mentioned, he thinks he has the advantage because he is in the Arctic. He's on this, like you said, ice platform. She is safe on the larger one. And as he's pointing and trying to shoot at the orca, he slides down after slipping. The orca then finally gets a hold of him and with one big foul swoop, blasts him with its tail and sends him flying over, and he hits the main ice like edge that she's on. And as he falls, he drops to a few. You then see him, and he's clearly been killed. He's now, obviously, the impact of his head and body is shattered him, hitting the side of the rock face, and he slowly falls into the water, and you see him kind of floating about. The whale then notices that he's motionless, looks up at her, and when looks up at her, she, with grief in her eyes, is looking at the orca, and now that the orca can see the grief in her eyes, he feels like, right, we're even now. I've completed, my grief.
There's this kind of like cross between her grief and fear. And so like the whale though is kind of interesting because he's like, I don't think he really has any plan for her. Like a lot of people will assume that even Nolan thought maybe if she was near him, the whale would hurt her, but it might have, because it's kind of just making its way. Like if you're in its way, it's going to take you down. But at this stage, the whale kind of just pokes up and it's kind of like, yeah, hi, it's me. I'm sweet little whale again. I got what I wanted. We're good.
Yeah. And that the whale, after finally, seeing him motionless, getting justice for the death of its mate. Slowly you see it kind of under the ice heading back into the main waters, where it's going to reconnect to this pod of whales, and she's sitting there in fear and sadness, but you also hear a helicopter in the background, so she clearly is about to be rescued, but it's far too late. And I also noticed when you see Nolan, when he's lying and he's slipping down and he's looking down, yes, he's dead, but there seems to be like a bit of relief on his face. Like he knows now he's dead, basically everyone's going to be safe.
Yeah.
And life will resume the way it was before. The fishing village can go back to fishing. The whale will go back to the ocean, back to its habitat. And she, despite all this tragedy, can probably move on with her life.
Yeah, it was always a little bit weird why she wanted to travel with. I mean, there's part of it is they were trying to build this romance between her and Nolan, but it really never came to what you would think it would be. But clearly there was interest there. And then of course she had like a scientific curiosity, because she had never really witnessed a whale doing it. She kind of believed it, but she needed to kind of study it more and see like why this whale would go to these lengths to chase down this guy.
Witnessing what she's seen, like it's one thing when you are an oceanologist or whatever the technical term for them is, and talk about it to a classroom of college students. It's a different realm when you're actually witnessing behavioral patterns of animals over talking them. You could have somebody who's read up on animals the entire life and can dictate and talk to you about the behaviors of animals, but unless you've actually been out there in the field and seen it for yourself, it's a whole different, perspective. And maybe this will open our eyes. And she clearly had respect for whales and kind of knew the patterns of whales, but maybe after now witnessing this and the events that transpired, it's give her a whole new perspective and a whole new kind of respect for whales. And
but fear not, people, if you're a fan of Captain Nolan here, he actually gets reborn as Professor Dumbledore, so you got that.
Yeah, for the first two Harry Potter films.
Correct. Yeah, he did eventually pass away, unfortunately, but
yeah,
good for him to be part of that Potter franchise for a couple of movies.
Yeah.
All right, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and he probably joined this particular movie and because he probably seen Jaws, and was hoping this would have the same kind of cultural impact, which I think once a film like that's done, it's hard to duplicate. So obviously Jaws made the impact it did, and it was all because of everything we know about it. Music score, great cinematography.
Yeah, I doubt that, because like you had movies like Piranha and Tentacles, and like even though I enjoyed those films, like nothing really compares to Jaws. Jaws was like its own monster by itself. It was just so masterfully done.
Yeah, and it's like also another thing about this, as much as I like it, you can tell it's a lower budgeted type movie compared to Jaws. And obviously the directors are very different directors. Steven Spielberg, of course, we know who he is now. He's carved this legacy for himself. A bit similar to like a director that at the minute mixed bag of a movie, Nosferatu. Obviously,
Eggers,
he's had this is like his fourth movie under his belt, and he's all about style over maybe substance, quite frankly, lately. But you have to respect what he done and how he does his movies. And it's like Steven Spielberg, he's the only one that can do his movies. Correct. And he's got the impact that he's had and the career he's had because of he invented that style. And I guess you could say the same for James Cameron, even though he's kind of He's
Oh, they all have
become,
their own
you
style,
know,
yeah. I mean, and then really, it's like regardless of how well the movies do, they're going to stay true to who they are. So like
mhm,
it's just how it is. All
yeah.
right, so rating this, how would you rate it, and what are your pros and cons in the end?
My pros is that it's the anti-Jaws. I like the fact that it was flipped on its head and you sympathise more with the creature than the animal. Sorry, the creature than the human, sorry. Which was a plus for me because I'm always, an animal lover, always rank and, go for animals where you can. I thought the cast was okay. I thought Harris did a great job. I like the story of this. Yes, it was a little bit, like you say, a bit far-fetched, took it to maybe levels that went too far in
Yeah,
terms of believability, but it's still a fun movie. The cons is, like you say, the budget. You can tell the budget on this. And I think it did have a little bit of pacing issues here and there.
yeah.
But apart from that, I still think it's a very good movie. And this is my first time watching it.
So what's your rating?
I'll give it a fair rating. I think 7 out of 10 is a fair rating.
Okay. That's what I give it as well, even though it was from my childhood. And I do like to visit this every so often because it's a lot of fun. But definitely has pacing issues. It also has issues with character development because it's rushing through each character a little bit too fast, I think. Normally, I don't push for extra time on a film, but this one probably could have used it because if we think about Nolan and what he's going through the film, where it kind of just keeps jumping around, we don't really get a clear idea of who he is. So if you think about Quint from Jaws, he's not in the film like a lot, but when he is, we know who he is. We know why he hates sharks, and we know like his Indianapolis speech is one of the most iconic things you'll ever hear in a movie. But that tells you who Quint is. We really never get a clear sign of who Nolan is. Or
And
why
apparently as well, that speech in Jaws is all ad-libbed.
Yes.
It wasn't
Yep.
actually in the script. He came up
And
with it on the fly.
chances are he was drunk when he did it too, because he drank a lot on that set. So
Yeah, and like probably one of the cons of this movie is the fact that it does underdevelop a lot of its characters, but I do think that's done deliberate because they didn't want to take away that of Nolan. I think Nolan basically was Captain Abraham. I think that's basically Captain Ahab. I think this is basically what this film was intended to be, a modern version of Captain
Moby
Ahab in Moby Dick. Yeah.
All right. So what is coming up on your channel? Let people know what you have in store.
So next week on the 17th, we have the Into the Darkness franchise discussion on The Grudge. And then on the 31st of January, we have the next classic kaiju connections movie review, which is The Giant Behemoth, which was the People's Choice. And at some point, we all, I think, on the 30th, the day before, we are going to be doing our next retro classic movie show, which is, of course, the 13th Warrior. And after doing this, I have decided I'm going to put up a mini personal blog on an experience I had in Romania. I went to a place called iSpace, which was like this interactive 3D kind of sit down like raid, and they had this underwater adventure part of it. So I think I took a lot of footage in there. So I think I'm going to edit it all together and put that up as a personal blog.
Oh, nice. Well, as for me, later this afternoon, tonight, Tony and Detta and I are getting together again for Ghouls of Midnight. We're going to be reviewing my pick of The Grapes of Death by Gene Roland. Then tomorrow, we'll be doing a Poetic Carnage with Edgar Allan Poe to talk about the recap of the 2024-25 NFL season and then the playoffs postseason. Friday, another Ghouls of Midnight. We're doing another one. This time, Mr. Tony's pick with Bug Buster. And I believe that's with Randy Quaid, I think. I didn't get a chance to watch it yet, but I think he's in it. And then I think Neko and I are actually going to do another Classic Reflections, but we're going to do something a little bit different with the actual review of the album. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then the rest of the month, obviously you talked about the Grudge franchise, which we will be doing. Then on the 25th, my Kaiju Spotlight will be again coming, unless I can get somebody else to move up a week before. But on the 25th, I'll be there with Lady Fat Blood doing Mothra. And so I'm pretty ready, psyched for that. But
that'll be cool.
I've got Neck over here doing some crazy shit. Like, she just can't help herself.
Well, you can always do Mothra on my channel, Neko.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. She'll do it too. So do you know what your next pick is for Synergy, or you haven't thought about it yet?
Well, this was my pick, I believe. Orca.
Oh, God, yeah, I keep doing it. I know what my pick is. Never
yours,
mind.
my
I
friend.
know what the pick is. And it's going to be The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. So it's on Tubi right now, so you can catch it now. So, yeah. I always think, because this is a movie I liked and I recommended you, was my pick, but it's actually his pick, and it's a good pick. So I'm glad he liked it.
Yes. And I think after your pick, I think I'm going to do something different. I've seen a film on Netflix, which is a Korean movie, which looks really good.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, we always like to kind of branch out and do some different shit.
I know the last time we did like a foreign pick, like a Korean movie, it was John E, which I think you enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully you'll like this one.
All right. So for those, please like and subscribe, comment. What did you think of this film? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Also, please go like and subscribe to the Entertainment Headquarters. A lot of great content over there, and be on the lookout for his content coming up. A lot of great discussions and a lot of fun. So please, please, please. For the rest of you, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you later. And he will see you later on the Meltdown Radio podcast. Take care of yourselves.